Logical conclusive report. Donald Trump's actions aligning with Russian interests and implications for American democracy. This report examines the actions of President Donald Trump that align with Russian interests, tracing connections to alleged Russian influence operations, financial ties, and public statements that suggest a pattern of behavior undermining U.S. national interests. It incorporates claims of historical ties to Soviet intelligence, Russian financial support, and specific actions during the 2016 election, culminating in an assessment of Trump's refusal to comply with a unanimous Supreme Court ruling. The report concludes with recommendations for the American people to address this erosion of democratic principles and constitutional integrity. 1. Historical context, alleged KGB grooming and financial ties. Claims from former KGB officials, such as Yuri Shvets and Elnur Musayev, suggest that Donald Trump was identified as a potential asset by Soviet intelligence as early as the 1970s and 1980s. Shvets, a former KGB major, alleges that Trump's vanity and ambition made him an ideal target for cultivation, beginning with his 1977 marriage to Ivana Zelnikova, a Czech model which drew the attention of Czechoslovakia's intelligence service, SB, in cooperation with the KGB. Musayev, a former Kazakh intelligence official, claimed in 2025 that Trump was recruited in 1987 during a Moscow visit under the codename Krasnov. While these claims lack definitive corroboration, they align with documented Soviet interest in Trump's 1987 Moscow trip, facilitated by Ambassador Yuri Dubinin and arranged through Intourist, a KGB-linked travel agency. Upon returning from Moscow, Trump took out full-page advertisements in major U.S. newspapers criticizing U.S. foreign policy and NATO, echoing Soviet talking points. This marked an early instance of Trump publicly aligning with anti-Western narratives, a pattern that persists. Financially, Trump's businesses have relied heavily on Russian money since the 1980s. For example, in 1980, Trump purchased 200 television sets for the Grand Hyatt New York from Semyon Kislin, a Soviet émigré whose Joy-Lud electronics store was allegedly a KGB front. Following multiple bankruptcies in the 1990s, Trump's real estate ventures were bolstered by Russian investors and oligarchs, with Donald Trump Jr. stating in 2008 that Russians make up a pretty disproportionate cross-section of a lot of our assets. These financial ties, including investments through anonymous shell companies and Deutsche Bank's alleged Russian money laundering schemes, suggest a dependency on Russian capital that may have created leverage. Analysis. The combination of alleged KGB cultivation and documented Russian financial support establishes a plausible foundation for influence. While direct evidence of recruitment remains unverified, the pattern of financial dependency and alignment with Russian narratives warrants scrutiny. 2. 2016 election, public call for Russian interference and collusion evidence. A pivotal moment in Trump's alignment with Russian interests occurred on July 27, 2016, when he publicly stated at a press conference, "Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing. I think you will probably be rewarded mightily by our press." This statement explicitly invited Russian interference in the U.S. election, targeting Hillary Clinton's private email server. Hours later, Russian hackers from the GRU, Russian military intelligence, began spear phishing attempts on Clinton's campaign, as documented by the Mueller report. This temporal correlation suggests that Trump's call was not merely rhetorical, but may have prompted actionable Russian efforts. The Mueller report, released in April 2019, detailed Russian interference through the Internet Research Agency's social media campaigns and the hacking of Democratic National Committee, DNC emails, which were leaked via WikiLeaks to damage Clinton's campaign. While the report did not establish criminal conspiracy, it documented over 140 contacts between Trump campaign associates and Russian nationals or WikiLeaks intermediaries, including the June 2016 Trump Tower meeting where Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, and Paul Manafort met with Natalia Veselnitskaya, a Kremlin-linked lawyer promising dirt on Clinton. The Senate Intelligence Committee's 2020 report further noted that the Trump campaign's interactions with Russian operatives signaled a willingness to accept foreign assistance, describing Manafort's coordination with Konstantin Kilimnik a suspected Russian intelligence operative, as a grave counterintelligence threat. The Steele dossier, compiled by former MI6 officer Christopher Steele, alleged a well-developed conspiracy of cooperation between the Trump campaign and Russian leadership managed through Manafort. While unverified, portions of the dossier, such as Russian efforts to support Trump and damage Clinton, were corroborated by U.S. intelligence and the Mueller report. These findings indicate a pattern of coordination, even if not legally actionable, that aligns with Russian objectives to destabilize U.S. democracy and elect Trump. Analysis: Trump's public request for Russian interference, coupled with extensive campaign contacts with Russian operatives, constitutes a clear alignment with Russia's election interference goals. The absence of criminal charges does not negate the ethical and national security implications of these actions. 3. Policy actions favoring Russian interests. Since taking office, Trump has pursued policies and actions that consistently align with Russian geopolitical objectives, undermining NATO. Trump repeatedly criticized NATO, calling it obsolete and threatening to withdraw U.S. support, weakening a key deterrent to Russian aggression. Soft stance on Ukraine. Trump temporarily withheld military aid to Ukraine in 2019, pressuring President Volodymyr Zelensky to investigate Joe Biden, leading to his first impeachment. In 2025, Trump recognized Russian control of Crimea and paused aid to Ukraine, aligning with Putin's territorial ambitions, siding with Putin over U.S. intelligence. At the 2018 Helsinki summit, Trump accepted Putin's denial of Russian election interference, contradicting U.S. intelligence agencies' conclusions, reducing U.S. global influence. Trump's withdrawal from international agreements like the Paris Climate Accord and the Iran nuclear deal weakened U.S. alliances, creating opportunities for Russian influence. These actions reflect a consistent pattern of prioritizing Russian interests over U.S. national security, undermining democratic allies, and destabilizing global institutions. Analysis: Trump's policy decisions mirror Russian strategic goals, particularly in weakening Western alliances and emboldening Russian expansionism. This alignment raises questions about whether personal or financial obligations influence his decision-making. 4. Supreme Court defiance, the Maryland man case. In a unanimous 9-0 Supreme Court ruling in 2025, the court ordered the repatriation of a Maryland man detained abroad, citing constitutional protections. Trump's refusal to comply with this ruling represents a direct challenge to the rule of law and judicial authority. This defiance, enabled by a Supreme Court stacked with Trump-appointed justices, underscores a broader pattern of eroding constitutional checks and balances. By ignoring the court's mandate, Trump signals a willingness to prioritize personal or political agendas over legal obligations, further aligning with authoritarian tactics favored by leaders like Vladimir Putin. Analysis: Trump's non-compliance with a unanimous Supreme Court ruling is a stark example of constitutional corrosion. It reflects a disregard for democratic institutions, mirroring the authoritarian governance style Russia seeks to promote globally. 5. Implications: Trump and supporters as threats to U.S. democracy. The cumulative evidence, alleged KGB cultivation, Russian financial ties, public calls for election interference, policy alignment with Russian interests, and defiance of judicial rulings, paints a troubling picture. Trump and his supporters, described as sycophants, appear to prioritize personal loyalty and political gain over national interests, undermining the U.S. Constitution and the will of the American people. This behavior aligns with Russian efforts to destabilize democratic institutions, as seen in the 2016 election interference and ongoing disinformation campaigns. The characterization of Trump as a Russian asset by former KGB officials, while unproven, gains plausibility in light of his actions, which consistently serve Russian objectives at the expense of U.S. sovereignty and democratic integrity. Analysis: Trump's actions constitute a betrayal of public trust and constitutional principles. His supporters' complicity in defending these actions exacerbates the threat, fostering a cult of personality that erodes democratic norms and emboldens foreign influence. 6. Recommendations: actions for the American people. To counter this corrosion of the nation's democratic foundation, the American people must take decisive collective action. Demand accountability through voting. Support candidates who prioritize constitutional integrity, transparency, and national security. Voter turnout in local, state, and federal elections is critical to countering authoritarian tendencies. Strengthen civic education. Promote widespread understanding of constitutional principles, the rule of law, and the dangers of foreign influence. Educated citizens are better equipped to recognize and resist disinformation. Support independent investigations. Advocate for renewed bipartisan investigations into Trump's Russian ties, financial dependencies, and potential conflicts of interest. Congressional oversight must be restored to ensure transparency. Reinforce judicial independence. Pressure lawmakers to protect the judiciary from political interference. Public campaigns and grassroots movements can amplify calls for compliance with Supreme Court rulings. Combat disinformation. Engage with reputable media, fact-check claims, and challenge Russian-backed narratives on social media. Community organizations can host workshops to teach media literacy and critical thinking. Mobilize grassroots movements, organize protests, petitions, and advocacy campaigns to hold Trump and his administration accountable. Coalitions of civil society groups can amplify these efforts. Protect electoral integrity. Support legislation to secure elections against foreign interference, such as the Defending Elections from Threats by Establishing Red Lines (DETR) Act. Public pressure can ensure robust implementation. Analysis. These actions empower citizens to restore democratic norms, counter foreign influence, and uphold the Constitution. Collective engagement is essential to reversing the erosion of America's foundational principles. Conclusion. Donald Trump's actions, from alleged KGB cultivation in the 1980s, reliance on Russian money, public calls for election interference in 2016, policy decisions favoring Russian interests, to defiance of a unanimous Supreme Court ruling, form a consistent pattern of alignment with Russian agendas. These actions, supported by his loyalists, undermine the U.S. Constitution and threaten national security, casting Trump and his enablers as betrayers of the American people. The evidence, while not conclusive of legal treason, suggests a profound ethical and patriotic failure. The American people must act decisively through voting, education, advocacy, and mobilization to restore democratic integrity and safeguard the nation's foundation against this corrosion. Only through collective resolve can the United States counter foreign influence and reaffirm its commitment to constitutional governance. By Scott Young, aka Sinfamous Gamer,